Well, g'day everybody. Welcome to the inside of my car. Yes, this is my first ever reaction video. I've never done a reaction video before, so I've got no idea how I'm going to react. The video I'm going to be reacting to is Physics Girl, Diana Cohen. Most of her stuff is actually really good, really educational, really informative, and just good quality documentaries. I've been watching her for years. Well worth the follow. But this time she made a video on hydrogen versus battery electric vehicles. Okay. Now, I'm not going to say it's misinformation. I think it's more of a, she's making more of assumptions, I guess. She's obviously coming from a point of someone that's never owned an electric vehicle. But bear in mind, this video is also sponsored by Toyota. And we know their position on hydrogen fuel cell cars. They seem to think that they are the future. Battery electric vehicle cars are just a fad. And this video is sponsored by Toyota. So I think she's getting her information from Toyota in this video, which I think, well, that's what I'm reacting to. It's just, yeah, just debunking a few myths, I guess, or adding my perspective as a EV owner of more than 5 years. So let's get into it.
Start with driving range. How far can you go in these cars? Most electric
Okay, let's start off with range. Range anxiety, anyone?
vehicles, battery electric. See, I did it. So most battery electric cars can go between about 100 and 200 miles. One of the higher end battery electric cars can go about 387 miles. Hydrogen cars are averaging about a 300-mile range. So they're already getting up toward the best battery cars.
Yes, as you all know, like charging range really isn't much issue. It's charging infrastructure, or in this case, refilling infrastructure when it comes to hydrogen in Australia doesn't exist. So yeah, range really isn't a factor. There's nothing between the two, about the same.
It's going to get a lot more complicated. Refueling time. Let's talk about the time. To refuel a battery electric vehicle, it's on the order of hours. If you're using the super fast chargers, it could be as little as a half an hour. When you're refueling with hydrogen, it takes about 5 minutes. But one thing that we talked about in the last video is that the experience driving a hydrogen car had so much to do with thinking about where the stations are.
So yeah, refueling, 5 minutes. Yeah, that's great, but that's pretty much the only advantage it's got. As you know, 90% of EV owners recharge at home, like right here in my garage. 240-volt power point out there, or I can use the wall charger, which you don't need, really. It's not a requirement. You can still use a 240-volt power point. And according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, I think it's 80% of car owners in Australia have off-street parking. So that gets rid of the, what if you live in a unit type thing? Anyway, get to that later. But also too, there's just no refueling infrastructure anywhere in Australia. Like the governments are rolling out DC fast chargers all across Australia. Companies are springing up everywhere. You don't see that happening with hydrogen, but it's just not needed. If you're coming in on a road trip, which covers maybe the distance of your road trip is about 150% of the range of your car, you only need one refueling stop. Because when you get to where you're going, you can recharge overnight when you get there and continue on the next day. Can't do that with hydrogen.
The other thing to consider is where you can refuel.
50% of people here live in multifamily housing. We don't all have garages. We don't all have parking spots. We don't all work at forward-leaning technology.
Yeah, I can't speak for America in that case. It said 50%. In Australia, it's 80%, so don't know.
I live with roommates, and I cannot put a charger into the house that I rent. But I could do hydrogen.
Why can't you put a charger in the house that you rent? You only need a PowerPoint. You got a mobile charger. That's all you need. You don't need to install a wall charger like I've got over there. You can still use that. As long as you've got a PowerPoint, you can charge your car. Doesn't matter if you rent or not.
Hydrogen, if there were a station close enough to where I live. So what have we got? We've got the stations are very few and far between.
She also mentioned if there's a station close enough nearby. That's an interesting point, because we've got Almove Park outside. There's a DC fast charger just 500 metres up the road, lucky for us. Ever since that's been installed, we use the Almove to go shopping most of the time. While we're shopping, that Almove gets charged up enough to cover every shopping trip for the next probably 2 weeks. So the Almove for now, since that installation, has never been charged at home. But again, that needs more infrastructure, needs more chargers around place where people live, I guess. So they're coming, obviously.
So let's move on to efficiency. So if we first look at the overall efficiency of hydrogen is 25 to 35%, whereas battery electric vehicles is 70 to 90. 25 to 35 versus 70 to 90. So let's look now at the losses that happen. So in order to get energy to...
Yeah, I think that's the big reason why hydrogen is never going to be a big thing for passenger vehicles. It's just inefficient. Like you said, 25 to 35%, 30% average. EV or battery electric, say 80% average. There's just no comparison. And there's, like you said, there's no way you can improve that. That's just laws of physics. You can't change that. You cannot change the laws of physics.
So for hydrogen, if you do electrolysis, which is the cleanest way of getting the hydrogen, you lose 30% of your energy. And then you lose energy compressing the hydrogen or cooling it, and then in transporting it, and then there's a significant loss going from the fuel cell to the wheel. Add all of that up, and you're looking at a 25 to 35% efficiency for fuel cells. And it's mostly things that you can't get around. The other thing to consider with efficiency is that batteries lose capacity over time. That doesn't happen nearly as much with fuel cell electric vehicles.
Let's
Let's
stop
look
you
at
there.
other uses within transportation.
I said batteries lose capacity over time. That's true. So does the battery in a hydrogen fuel cell car. Remember, hydrogen fuel cell cars are still electric vehicles and they have a battery, albeit a smaller one, because a hydrogen fuel cell car cannot deliver the power on demand as quickly as a battery can. So when you stamp your foot on the throttle, you want to drag race somebody, a fuel cell can't give you that power. That's why it needs a battery. So the fuel cell charges the battery for you and you to use while you're driving. So that battery is going to degrade just as well. So it's not quite accurate, that one.
But when it comes to carrying more weight, going farther, going faster, fuel cells have the advantage. And the reason why is because of one graph, and I'm going to show it to you guys right now. What you're seeing here is, on this axis, you're seeing the vehicle test weight. So that's how heavy the vehicle is. And then
Okay, I don't see why weight has anything to do with it. I mean, this car has 75 kilowatt hour battery. The iMove outside has 16 kilowatt hour battery. Sure, that's lighter. This is heavier. It's not a decision in buying the car or driving the car. I mean, it's irrelevant in a passenger vehicle, really. I mean, do you care how much your car weighs when you buy it or you're driving it? No. Aircraft and stuff might make a difference, yes, but cars, no. Hang on, wait a minute. If you're going to put more longer range in a fuel cell car, right? She's claiming it doesn't add weight. Where are you going to put the extra hydrogen? Is it going to tank under higher pressure? Or do you put more tanks in? More tanks, more weight. Again, like the weight thing really is it's a non-argument. Yeah, sure, battery cars get heavier as they have bigger range. So?
Where I lived in Colorado, people really used these vehicles to their full capacity. Four-wheel drive every weekend, 4 people, dogs, skis, snowboards on top of the cars. Really have to give consumers what they want if we expect to be successful.
the hydrogen is a very
Yeah, you're sort of pointing out one small use case scenario for hydrogen fuel cell for people to go camping, all the shit over the car and spend weeks out in the bush. Well, yeah, people do that and they might use a hydrogen fuel cell for that. But that's not the vast majority of cars on the road. That's only a small use case scenario. Even so with battery tech like the Cybertruck and the Rivians and stuff coming out now, again, is that really going to be an issue?
and Toyota, among other auto manufacturers, are already testing big rig fuel cell trucks. We actually got to see one. We went to visit one in the Port of Long Beach.
Actually, just about every major truck automaker is developing fuel cells right now. So between the likes of Daimler, Volvo, Freightliner, Mack, all of them kind of funneling and getting onto the development of fuel cells. Even startup companies, Hyzon, Nikola.
Is anyone working on a battery electric?
Wait a sec. You said Nikola? Really? Okay, data's a bit old. Fuel cell trucks? I can see them in long haul trucks, yes. You know, the ones that travel across the outback to oil well fields out in the middle of the desert, stuff like that. I can maybe see fuel cell use there, yes. The ones that go to and from the mines carrying those massive mining equipment, yeah. But the vast majority of trucks are urban. They run around the supermarkets and they run around the factories and industrial areas in cities, essentially. And there's already a lot of battery electric trucks in development to cover that market. So I don't see fuel cell trucks being a big sector of the trucking industry, if you know what I mean. Shipping, yes. Rail, yes. But that's pretty much it for trucking. Just only the long haul stuff out in the outback. I don't see it for being most of it. But Nicola, come on, guys.
Seems like, from what most people we talked to said, there are more promising uses for fuel cells in other areas of transportation, especially when it comes to
Yeah, like she said, there's more promising uses of fuel cells in other forms of transportation, not cars.
higher weight, higher range, higher speed. So the
Again, the weight. I don't know what the weight's got to do with it for cars, but anyway.
infrastructure for the charging network and the refueling network is not there. And it's much less there for hydrogen than it is for batteries.
We were having issues with the nozzles freezing up. So we went from these like very isolated applications for these nozzles where they were used, by professionals. Everyday consumers were trying to use it while they're talking on their phone and bouncing a baby, or we were experiencing these issues. People for some reason decided that pouring water on a frozen nozzle would thaw it out, when in fact it was just getting more moisture inside the nozzle and was causing it to freeze more.
Where we need more.
Okay, that seems like a very unpleasant user experience, to be honest. Everybody knows how to plug in a mobile phone, plug in your car the same way. It's not exactly hard work, and you don't need to stand there juggling a baby or pour water over it. Really? Now, I've used to have LPG powered vehicles in the past, and yes, the nozzles do freeze up, and some people yes did pour water over them, it's caused them to freeze up even more. But it wasn't a pleasant user experience. So, as for the convenience, plugging it at home overnight versus going to a station, have a nozzle freeze, pouring water over it, if you can actually find one.
If we replaced all 15 million cars in California right now with electric vehicles and plugged them all in at the same time at night, the grid would fail.
Well, hey, we have 17,000 trucks at the Twin.
Nah, that's a myth, because I think the AEMO has even stated in Australia, if every single car in Australia became electric overnight, then the grid capacity would increase between 4 and 14%. That's it. Remember that thing called off-peak? Why is it off-peak? Because that's when the coal power plants have no more load on them and they need a minimum load or base load to keep them turning. So they encourage hot water usage, stuff like that, off-peak rates, cheap electricity to encourage you to use it, so keep the coal generator spinning. That is when you charge your car. That's why it's called off-peak. And also too, you never charge from 0 to 100% at home. You never do. Maybe when you buy the car and it's empty, maybe. Because if you're commuting every day, you do an average of 30 Ks every day from a full charge. You come home, you've done your 30 kilometres. How much energy are you topping up the car? The 30 kilometres worth. So if this uses 15 kilowatts per 100 kilometres, you're using a third of that. So that's 5 kilowatts every night. That's all you're charging. You use that probably more boiling the jug at night, cooking your dinner and stuff like that. So, and if you're only charging 5 kilowatts off a 240 volt, take a few hours, off peak, problem solved. Also, solar's a big thing in Australia. We've got solar, we charge off solar, it's in the batteries. So yeah, that's just straight up myth, that one.
The Twin Ports here. What do you think it would take to take a quarter of those, 4,000 trucks offline and charge them overnight? When you look at scale that large.
But if instead you had some...
Okay, he mentions fleets there. You might have a point. Okay, if you've got a fleet of, say, 50 trucks, you want to recharge a quarter of them every night. That's a lot of energy draw, yes. But again, that's for your hydrogen fuel cell. You don't put it in the truck. You put it in the depot to charge big batteries in the depot. So when the trucks do come back, they're drawing out of the batteries charged by the fuel cells, not the grid. So there's another option for hydrogen fuel cells right there. Battery storage, it's energy storage.
Important. The more diversification you have, the more security you have. If there's a hydrogen shortage, you can charge an electric car. Or for whatever reason, the electrical grid is down. If you have hydrogen cars available, you can go refuel with hydrogen. During the middle of the day was more renewable.
That's kind of weird. If the electrical grid is down and you can't recharge an electric car, how can you refuel a hydrogen car? What do those pumps run on?
Like solar and wind, we can...
Does hydrogen fuel cell refueling stations need power? I don't know, I've never actually seen one, so comment below if you know.
Absorb those renewables and absorb those electricity stored in the batteries. And then during the night when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, we can then reuse that electricity. And then this...
There's that old chestnut. When the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. You do have a point. Excess solar energy or excess renewable energy, as I say, is causing problems with the Australian grid. Well, it actually isn't. But use the extra energy to make hydrogen. But not for putting cars. You can make hydrogen for making steel. You can add it to ammonia to export it. It's an energy export, it's an energy store. So if you've got excess power on the grid and you need to soak it up quickly, just use it to make hydrogen. And that makes perfect sense. Like I said, it becomes an energy store then. Once it's in hydrogen, you can move it somewhere else, albeit with great loss. But yes, he's got a point there.
One of the questions that we are asked is, what about the battery electric vehicle, the BEV? Is that going to win? Or is this fuel cell electric vehicle going to win? Yeah. But it turns out they're both going to be winners because they're both going to be needed.
Yeah, he has made a point there. There really is no winners and losers in this. what I see is battery electric vehicles being the winners for personal transport, cars and urban trucking. Yes, the hydrogen fuel cell will probably power those electric vehicles outside of the areas where battery electric vehicles and trucks aren't practical. So they'll be side to side, they complement each other essentially. So a good point there. At the end of the day though, it's just inefficient. Simple as that. And for cars, the user experience to me seems terrible. I mean, why would I go to a service station, fill up the car with a gas pump that's probably going to freeze up, and pay a lot of money for it, and then drive all the way home when I can just come home, plug the car in, walk inside, and have dinner, go to sleep, watch TV, watch YouTube, make YouTube videos, that sort of thing. User experience, end of the day, will dictate, and also the efficiency. So you have it. My first reaction video. Tell me in comments below what you think. I mean, I told you what I think. You've seen extracts of the video. I don't want to show you the whole video because obviously I don't have copyright strikes. Not that I matter on your tiny channel. But yes, that's just my thoughts on my first ever reaction video. So, thank you again for watching. Take care of yourselves. I hope you're well and be safe in this coronavirus world at the moment, the way things are going. Thank you for watching. And don't forget the usual shit. Anyway, thank you. Bye. Really, well,